I was standing at the kitchen sink on a Tuesday morning in March. The faucet was running, and I was washing out a coffee mug that didn't need washing, but I washed it anyway because my hands needed something to do. Outside the window, the oak tree in the backyard was still bare. March in Ohio does that. Gives you fake promises. Makes you think the world is about to change, but it holds its breath for another week. My phone sat on the counter, face down. I hadn't picked it up since 6 that morning. My daughter Tracy had texted me at 5:45, just 3 words. "Mom, I need to talk." No period, no exclamation point, just those 3 words hanging there like something dead in the water. I texted back, "Okay." And then I made my coffee and I sat at the table and I drank it slow and I listened to the house be quiet. That was 3 weeks ago. That was the day everything started coming a. I want to tell you how it happened, not because I think anyone needs to hear it, but because if I don't say it out loud, it will just sit inside me forever and rot. I am 68 years old. I have lived long enough to know that some things you carry and some things you set down. This one I have been carrying for a year. My arms are tired. My name is Diane. My husband's name was Gary. He died 14 months ago. Cancer. Pancreatic. The kind they don't talk about at church because it makes people feel helpless. He went fast once they found it. 4 months from diagnosis to done. I held his hand in a hospital room in Dayton while the machine next to his beeped, and I counted every beep like it was a countdown to something I wasn't ready to name. We were married 43 years. Met at a bowling alley in 1981. He was the worst bowler I ever saw. He threw the ball straight into the gutter 3 times in a row and then looked at me like he was proud of himself. I laughed so hard I couldn't stand up. That was the beginning. That was the whole beginning right there. A man who throws balls in the gutter and doesn't care. He worked at Delphi for 31 years. Assembly line. Bad back. Good man. Quiet. He fixed things around the house on weekends. Rewired the kitchen when the outlets started sparking. Built a deck off the back that we never used because it rained every Saturday in June. He loved his truck more than he loved most people. A 1998 Ford F-150 with a dent in the passenger door from when Tracy was 17 and backed into a mailbox. He kept that dent for the rest of the truck's life. Said it was character. Tracy was our only child, our miracle baby. I had 3 miscarriages before her. 3 losses that nobody talked about in 1983. I kept those losses quiet because that was what women did. You suffered and you moved on and you didn't make it anyone else's problem. When Tracy came into this world, she was so small. 5 pounds 4 ounces. She fit in the palm of Gary's hand and he looked at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. Maybe she was. Tracy grew up in the house on Maple Drive. Same house I am sitting in right now. She had her bedroom on the 2nd floor. Blue walls with white clouds that I painted myself. Took me 2 weekends. My back ached for a week. She was so happy when I finished. She said, "Mom, it looks like God made the sky just for me." I almost cried right there with the paint on my hands. Almost. She was a good kid. Quiet like her father. Smart. Got scholarships. Went to Ohio State. Came home every other weekend with her laundry and her appetite and her laugh. That laugh. It was loud and unapologetic, and it filled the whole house. Gary would say to me sometimes, "Listen to her, that's the best sound in this house," and I would agree, he was right. After college, Tracy met Mark Polanski. He was a salesman, insurance. Nice looking in that way that makes you think he knows what he is doing. He wore his shirts untucked on purpose. He had a smile that seemed to be practicing for something. I liked him okay. Not like I liked Gary, but okay. He came to the house for Thanksgiving that first year and he helped Gary fix the garbage disposal and they talked about trucks for an hour and I thought maybe this could work. They got married in 2012. Small wedding. Lakeside. Tracy wore white. Mark wore a blue suit that was too big in the shoulders. My sister Janice drove up from Cincinnati and she cried when they said their vows. Gary held my hand and he didn't say anything, but I could feel him squeezing. That was his way of saying, "I love you too." Mark moved in with them right away. They bought a house in Springfield, starter home, 2 bedrooms, close to Mark's office. Tracy worked at a dental office. She was a receptionist and she was good at it. People liked her. She had that calm energy. The kind that makes you feel like everything is going to be fine even when it isn't. And I helped. That's what I did. I helped. Every chance I got. When their first kid was born in 2014, I watched her for 3 days a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays and every other Saturday. I would drive to Springfield in my Camry, 20 minutes. I would walk in with a bag of groceries and a batch of cookies, and I would sit on their living room floor and play with little Emma while Tracy went to work. Emma was 4 months old, and she would grab my finger with her whole fist and hold on like I was the only safe thing in the world. I would drive home that night and cry in the parking lot of Major because I didn't want to let go of her. Then Caleb came in 2017. Same thing. I helped. I drove. I showed up. I never missed a Tuesday or a Thursday unless I was sick. I was not often sick. I kept myself busy. Gardens, walking, the book club at the library that met on Wednesday nights. I read a lot. I liked the quiet. Mark never really said thank you, not in a way that stuck. It was always something like, "Oh, thanks, Mom," or "Hey, thanks for watching the kids." Like I was a background character in a show he was starring in. But I didn't mind. That's what family does. You help, you show up. You don't keep score. Gary retired in 2015. His back was done. Delphi gave him a small package, not much, enough for bills. He spent his days in the garage, puttered, watched the news, drank his coffee at the table and read the paper like it was 1985. I think he missed the noise of the factory, missed having somewhere to go that wasn't this house. Tracy and Mark's life got bigger. Bigger house. Better cars, they were doing fine. Mark's commission checks were getting bigger. He started talking about investments. He said he was putting money into something called a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. I didn't understand it and I didn't ask. He was the young one. He knew things. That was the thought. I should have asked more questions. I should have paid attention. But I was busy being useful, being the grandmother who drives over, being the wife who keeps the house running, being the woman who makes sure everyone else is okay. I forgot to check on myself. Gary got sick in the fall of 2023. The weight loss came first, then the yellow in his eyes, then the pain. The doctor in Springfield told us stage 4. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. Stage 4? Options are limited. We can try some things, but I want to be honest with you. Gary grabbed my hand right there and said, "Don't you dare cry." And I said, "I'm not crying." And I was crying. I was crying so hard the nurse had to leave the room. He died on a Sunday night in January. The house was quiet after that. Not quiet like it used to be when he was alive and the TV was on low. Quiet like something was missing, like the air had been pulled out. I slept in his side of the bed for the first week because I thought if I stayed there I could still feel him. I couldn't. He was gone. The sheets were just sheets. Tracy came over the next day. She sat on the edge of the bed and she held my hand and she said, "Mom, I don't know how you are going to do this." And I said, "I don't know either." But I did. You do it because there is no other option. You put one foot in front of the other and you make coffee and you wash the dishes and you drive to the store and you come home and the house is still quiet. So you do it again. After the funeral, Tracy and Mark started coming over more. Mark especially. He would mow my lawn, fix the porch light, bring over dinner on Sundays. He was helpful, attentive. He would sit at the kitchen table and talk to me about his work, and I would nod and say, "That sounds good." He seemed like a different person than the one who used to say, "Thanks, Mom," and walk away. Maybe the grief changed him. Maybe he just knew how to act when it counted. 3 months after Gary died, Mark mentioned something. We were in the kitchen. Tracy was at work. He said he had been thinking about my situation. He said I should look into getting a reverse mortgage, use the equity in the house. He said I could pull out money and not have to sell. He said he had a guy, a financial advisor. He said the guy was really good, really trustworthy. He wrote the name on a napkin and handed it to me, Alan something. I don't remember the last name. I put the napkin in my purse and I forgot about it for a week. Then Tracy brought it up again. She said Mark's friend Alan could help. She said she'd looked into it. She said the numbers were good. She showed me a printout. It looked official, lots of columns and numbers. I didn't read it. I looked at it the way you look at a tax form. I saw the bottom line and I said, "Okay, let's do it." That was March. The same March I am telling you about now. What happened next was not a reverse mortgage. What happened next was a robbery. Clean, methodical, and it was done by my son-in-law while my daughter held the door open. I found out on a Wednesday. I had gone to the bank to deposit a check. A small one. Gary's life insurance had paid out in one lump. I had put most of it into a savings account, but I still had a checking account. I wrote a check to the electric company, and when the teller ran it, she said there was a problem. She said the account was overdrawn, not by a little, by a lot. She said the balance was negative $14,000. I stood at the counter and I said, "What?" She said the account was overdrawn, ma'am. I said that is not possible. She looked at her screen and she said it looks like a series of transfers were made over the past several months. Large transfers. To an account at a different bank. I drove home. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the steering wheel. I parked in the driveway and I sat in the car for 20 minutes. The engine was off. The radio was on low. Somebody was talking about the weather. I turned it off. Then I went inside. I sat at the kitchen table. I opened my laptop. I typed in my bank login. I stared at the screen. There were 11 transfers, over 6 months, each one between $8,000 and $15,000. The receiving account belonged to a company called Heritage Funding Group. I had never heard of it. I looked it up. It was a lending outfit in Columbus. That was where Mark had worked before insurance. He had been in lending, microloans, high-interest stuff. I didn't know that, or maybe I did and I forgot. The total was just over $71,000. Gone from my account. From the money Gary and I had saved over 40 years, the house, the retirement, the what-if money, all of it. I called Tracy first. She didn't answer. I called Mark. He didn't answer. I called Tracy again. This time she picked up. She was at work. She said, "Mom, what's wrong?" I said, "Where is the money?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What money?" And I said the $70,000 that was in my savings account until 6 months ago. She said, "I don't know what you are talking about." I said, "I have the transfers right here. I am looking at them. I can see your name on the account you set up at Heritage Funding. The account you opened in your name. The account that received every dollar that was taken from my account." She said she needed to call me back. She hung up. Mark called me 20 minutes later. He said, "Look, I can explain." I said, "Explain what?" He said, "It's not what you think." I said, "Then tell me what I am thinking." He said he had borrowed the money. He said it was a business opportunity. He said he was going to pay it back. He said he had a plan. I said, "What plan?" He said a real estate deal in Columbus. He said the numbers were there. He said he just needed time. He said he was going to make it right. I said, "You took $70,000 from my bank account. You forged my name on a power of attorney. You opened a line of credit against my house. You took money from a dead man's insurance and you put it into a company that you own. Is that what you are calling a plan?" He went quiet. Then he said, "Diane, I know this looks bad." I said, "It doesn't look bad. It looks like a theft." He said, "I was going to tell you." He said, "I was waiting for the right time." I said, "There is no right time for stealing from your mother-in-law. There is only the wrong time, and you are living in it." He said Tracy didn't know. He said she had no idea. I said that breaks my heart. He said, "I swear on my kids," and I hung up. I called Tracy back. She answered on the first ring. She knew I was calling. She said, "Mom, please don't do this." I said, "Do what?" She said, "Don't call the bank. Don't call the police. Let me come over. Let me explain." I said, "Explain what?" She said, "Everything." She said Mark has been struggling. He has debt, a lot of debt. Credit cards, personal loans. He borrowed from people. He said he could fix it. He said the real estate deal was going to change everything. She said he never meant to hurt me. He said it was supposed to be temporary. I said, "Temporary? You stole $70,000 and you call it temporary." She started crying, not soft crying, ugly crying, the kind that comes from the gut. She said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know." She said, "I swear I didn't know until last week." She said, "Mark told me last Sunday. He said he made a mistake. He said he was going to fix it. She said he promised he would pay it back." She said, "Please don't be mad at me." I said, "Why would I be mad at you?" She said, "I don't know." I said, "Because you are his wife. Because you let this happen. Because you stood in this house last summer and smiled at me and ate my food and watched my grandchildren and you let him pick my pockets." She said, "I didn't know." I said, "I know you didn't know. That's not what I am talking about. She didn't come over that day, or the next, or the next. She sent a text that said, "I love you, Mom. Please let me fix this." I didn't respond. I contacted a lawyer the following Monday. A woman named Patricia Hollies who had an office on Route 3. She was direct. She said what he did was fraud. She said the power of attorney was forged. She said I had grounds for a criminal complaint and a civil lawsuit. She said we could freeze the heritage account. She said we could file a lien against the property. She said it would take time. She said these things always take time. I sat in her office and I looked at the walls and I thought about Gary. I thought about how he used to say, "Don't lend money to family." He said it all the time. "Don't do it. Keep the books clean." He was so careful with money. He saved every penny. He drove that truck until the transmission gave out. He wore the same boots for 15 years. He was not a rich man. He was a careful man. And now his wife was sitting in a lawyer's office trying to explain how their savings disappeared into the hands of a man who called her mom. The police were involved after that. Detective Rivera came to the house. He was young. He had kind eyes. He sat at my kitchen table and he asked me questions and I answered them because what else do you do? He said based on the evidence they could pursue charges. He said forgery, theft, identity fraud. He said it could be felony charges. He said Mark had a prior. A DUI from 2016. He said it would depend on how cooperative Mark was. Mark lawyered up. His lawyer called my lawyer. They went back and forth for weeks. Mark's lawyer said Mark intended to repay the funds. He said it was a misunderstanding. He said the power of attorney was signed with my consent. I said I never signed a power of attorney for heritage funding. He said there was a document on file. I said I never signed that document. My lawyer said the signature was a match. I said then someone practiced my signature for weeks until they got it right. The months that followed were the worst of my life. Worse than Gary's death. Worse than the miscarriages. Worse than anything. Because at least with death the enemy was done. With this, the enemy was still in my life. Still driving to my house on Sundays. Still bringing over dinner. Still mowing my lawn. Still sitting at my table like he had done nothing. Tracy called me every day for the first 2 weeks. She sounded broken. She said she was so sorry. She said she didn't know how he could do this. She said she was furious. She said she didn't know who her husband was anymore. I said I don't know either. She said she wanted to come over. I said I can't see you right now. She said why? I said because every time I look at you I see him. She went quiet. Then she said okay. And she didn't call the next day. The next call came 4 days later. She said she and Mark had separated. She said he moved out. She said she was staying at her sister's place in Beaver Creek. She said she was scared. I said of what? She said of everything. She said she had looked at their finances and Mark had credit card debt of over $90,000. She said he had been hiding it for years. She said she felt like she didn't know him. I said I know the feeling. She asked me if she could come over for Thanksgiving. I said no. She said please. I said I need time. She said how much time? I said I don't know. She said I'll wait. I said don't wait for me, go live your life. She said I can't do that. I said then I can't see you. And I hung up. Thanksgiving came and went. I cooked a turkey by myself. I set the table for one. I ate at the kitchen counter because the dining room table was too big for one person. I watched the football game and I drank wine and I didn't call anyone. My sister Janice called. She said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm fine." She said, "You sound tired." I said, "I am tired." She said, "Come to Cincinnati for Christmas." I said, "Maybe." She said, "Don't maybe me." I said, "I'll think about it." She said, "You always think about it and you never come." I said, "I know." She said, "I miss you." I said, "I miss you too," and I meant it. The legal fight took 8 months. 8 months of documents and depositions and court dates. Mark's lawyer fought hard. He said the transfers were authorized. He said I had dementia. He said I didn't understand what I was signing. My lawyer fought harder. She had a neuropsychologist evaluate me. I scored perfect on every test. My memory was sharp. My cognition was intact. The judge reviewed the findings and ruled that I was competent. The forged signature was confirmed by a handwriting expert. The case moved forward. In October, a settlement was reached. Mark agreed to repay the full amount over 3 years with interest. He agreed to surrender the heritage account. He agreed to a restraining order that kept him away from my home and my finances. In exchange, the criminal charges were dropped. I wanted them pressed. My lawyer said it would take another year and it would drain the recovered funds. I said fine. I signed the agreement and I went home and I sat in Gary's chair and I put my face in my hands and I shook. Tracy and I talked on the phone sometimes. Not often. She would call and say she was doing okay. She said she had a new ament. She said Caleb was in soccer. She said Emma was in 3rd grade and she wanted to be a veterinarian. She said Mark was living with his mother in Reynoldsburg. She said she didn't know if they would reconcile. I said that's their business. She said I hate him. I said I don't hate anyone. She said you should. I said hate is a lot of work for a person who is already tired. She came to the house once, 4 months after the settlement. She showed up on a Saturday morning without calling. I opened the door and she was standing on the porch with Caleb. He was 7. He had her eyes, big and brown, and looking up at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He said, "Hi, Grandma," and my heart broke. Not in the way it broke before. This was a different kind of breaking. This was the kind that happens when you love someone and you can't be near them because the person they are married to stole from you. This was the kind that doesn't have a name. I let them in. I made breakfast. Scrambled eggs and toast. Tracy sat at the table and she didn't say much. Caleb told me about a fish he caught our lake. He said it was as long as his arm. I said that's a big fish. He said he named it Gerald. I laughed. Tracy looked at me and she smiled, and it was real. Not the performance smile she used to give. A real one. And then it faded and she said, "I'm sorry about everything." I said, "I know." She said, "I don't think he's a bad person." I said, "I know that too." She said, "He's just weak." I said, "Maybe." She said, "I love you, Mom." I said, "I love you too," and she left. Caleb hugged me at the door and said, "Bye, Grandma." I said, "Bye, sweetheart." And then they were gone and the house was quiet again. It has been a year now, a year since I found out. I still live in the same house. I keep the same garden. I drive the same Camry. I go to the book club on Wednesdays and I sit in the back and I read and I listen to other people talk about books I have already read. I don't correct them. I just listen. The repayment comes every month. Mark sends a check. It is always on time. The amount is the same. He has never once called to ask how I am doing. I don't know if that is guilt or just obligation. Maybe there is no difference. Tracy and I text sometimes, not calls. Texts, short ones. "How are you? I'm fine. The kids are good," that kind of thing. She sent me a picture of Emma in her soccer uniform last month. I looked at it for a long time. I zoomed in on her face. She looked so much like Tracy at that age. I saved the picture and I looked at it every night before I went to sleep. It was the closest thing I had to being okay. My sister Janice still tells me to come to Cincinnati. I say I will. I don't. I don't go because I don't want to explain. I don't want to sit at her table and answer questions about why my son-in-law stole from me. I don't want to see the look on her face. The pity. The judgment. The way people always look at you after something like this, like you are made of glass. Like you might shatter if they say the wrong thing, so I stay here. In this house. In this kitchen. At this sink. Washing mugs that don't need washing. Waiting for the phone to ring. It doesn't ring. Not the way I need it to. Some nights I go into the bedroom and I open the closet and I touch Gary's shirts. They still smell like him. Faint, almost gone, but there. I hold them and I close my eyes and I pretend he is still here. That this is still 2019 and he is in the garage and the TV is on and Tracy is coming over for dinner and Mark is fixing the gutters and the world is simple and good and no one is stealing from me. But it's not. I am 68 years old. I have buried my husband. I have been robbed by my family. I have sat in a courtroom and watched a man I trusted sit on the other side of the room like I was a stranger. I have lost the people I thought would always be mine. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough to change the shape of everything. The garden is coming back. I planted tomatoes last week. They are small, green, ugly in the way that all beginnings are ugly. But they are there. They are pushing up through the dirt. They don't know what happened. They don't care. They just grow. I water them every morning. I stand out there in my robe and my slippers, and I hold the hose and I watch the water hit the dirt, and I think about how simple things are. How the ground doesn't ask questions. How the tomatoes don't need you to explain yourself. They just need water and sun and time. I go inside, I wash the mug. I sit at the table, I wait. That is what I do now, I wait. For what I don't know, but I wait.